If they play dirty, outsmart them mentally. Because this world does not reward the cleanest heart. It rewards awareness. It rewards positioning. It rewards those who understand the game they're already standing inside. This truth is especially difficult for spiritually awakened people. Because awakening teaches compassion, patience, empathy, and restraint. But it rarely teaches how power actually moves when empathy is absent. Most people believe that playing clean guarantees protection. It doesn't. It guarantees visibility. Good people are not targeted because they are weak. They are targeted because they are predictable. That's the truth most people resist. People misunderstand what psychological power really is. They think it's cruel. They think it's manipulation. They think it requires abandoning values. That belief is convenient. It allows people to avoid learning how influence actually works. Strategic thinkers never taught people how to be evil. What they taught was awareness. How to see clearly. How to survive with integrity in environments that do not operate on integrity. Look around your life for a moment. At work. In your family. In spiritual communities. In friendships. In business. Notice something subtle. The people who manipulate rarely look aggressive. They look calm. They look reasonable. They speak softly while rearranging circumstances in their favor. They don't overpower you. They outposition you. Power does not come from volume. It comes from timing. From silence. From understanding how people behave when they believe no one is watching closely. If someone plays dirty with you, it is not because they are stronger. It is because they understand human behavior without the comfort of moral assumptions. They know that good people hesitate. Good people hope fairness will self-correct. Good people believe intentions matter more than outcomes. That belief is the opening. Now let's be very clear. This is not about becoming cruel. It is not about lying, cheating, or harming others. This is about understanding the environment you are already in. Because refusing to see the game does not remove you from it. It only makes you an easy piece. In the next minutes, you are going to learn 10 psychological principles. Not motivational quotes. Mental tools. Tools that help you stop reacting. Stop explaining. Stop bleeding energy to people who do not deserve access to your spirit. If you stay until the end, you will not feel louder. You will feel calmer. Sharper. Harder to move. Before we continue, drop this affirmation in the comments. I see the game. Number 1. Why dirty players target good people. Here is the truth that most people never want to hear, because it challenges how they see themselves before it challenges how the world works. Good people are not targeted because they are weak. They are targeted because they are readable. They are consistent. They are transparent. They behave the same way in every environment, with every person, under the assumption that others are operating from the same moral baseline. And that assumption becomes a map. Manipulative people are not looking for strength to overpower. They are looking for patterns to exploit. They watch quietly. They observe who pauses before responding. Who softens language to avoid discomfort. Who rushes to explain intentions. Who feels guilty enforcing boundaries. Who believes harmony is more important than position. These behaviors are not flaws of character. They are virtues, but in hostile environments, virtues become signals. Signals tell others exactly how far they can push without consequence. This is where spiritually awakened individuals are especially vulnerable. Awareness opens the heart, but if it does not sharpen perception, it leaves the door unlocked. The common mistake good people make is assuming shared values. They believe rules are mutual. They believe fairness is universal. They believe intentions matter more than outcomes. That belief feels noble. But it creates predictability. The moment you assume the other side will act the way you would act, you surrender leverage over timing, tone, and escalation. You give them permission to move first while you wait for decency to appear. Dirty players understand this deeply. They do not rush. They test. They start small. A slight delay. A subtle misrepresentation. A quiet shift of responsibility. An ignored boundary. And then they watch. If you stay polite, they advance. If you stay hopeful, they continue. If you explain instead of observing, they adapt. Each reaction teaches them how far they can go without resistance. This is why manipulation rarely begins loudly. It escalates slowly. Incrementally. Just enough to avoid confrontation while still moving position. Good people often believe restraint earns respect. Strategic thinkers observe the opposite. Restraint without leverage invites pressure. When someone realizes you will always choose harmony over position, they no longer need to negotiate. They only need to wait. This is the real danger, not kindness, but predictability. Manipulative people do not fear ethics. They fear uncertainty. They fear individuals whose thresholds are unclear. They fear people who do not rush to restore balance. They fear silence that does not apologize for itself. This is why strategic awareness warns against wearing virtue on the surface. Not because virtue is wrong, but because advertising it removes flexibility. When people know exactly who you are at all times, they know exactly how to push you off center. The solution is not cruelty. It is strategic ambiguity. You do not need to change who you are internally. You need to change what you reveal externally. You do not owe consistency to those who have not earned trust. You do not owe clarity to those collecting information. You do not owe predictability to people who benefit from your hesitation. Once you stop assuming decency, leverage returns. Once you stop filling silence, control returns. Once you stop volunteering limits, you stop being easy. Drop this affirmation in the comments right now. I move with awareness. Because awareness does not harden you. It protects you. And protection is not the opposite of compassion. It is the container that allows compassion to survive. Number 2, the power of controlled silence. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in human interaction. Most people think silence is absence, withdrawal, weakness, avoidance. In reality, silence is pressure without effort. People speak far more often to relieve their own discomfort than to communicate truth. Those who manipulate understand this instinctively. They provoke not to exchange information, but to trigger speech. Because whoever speaks first reveals position. When you speak quickly, you leak priorities. When you explain, you expose pressure points. When you clarify emotionally, you reveal where influence lands. Silence removes that surface. The psychology behind this is simple. The human mind hates unresolved space. When expected reactions do not arrive, uncertainty forms. And uncertainty creates internal pressure. Dirty players are conditioned to manage situations through pace. They provoke, then watch for speed. Quick responses signal urgency. Urgency signals vulnerability. Silence breaks that loop. When others anticipate reaction and receive stillness instead, they lose orientation. They begin filling gaps. They explain more than necessary. They justify actions unprompted. They reveal intent while trying to regain control. What feels like inactivity is actually leverage shifting. The common mistake people make is filling silence out of politeness. They fear being misunderstood. They fear appearing rude. They fear losing the relationship. Manipulators rely on this fear. They ask questions they already know the answer to. They express confusion they do not feel. They provoke clarification not to understand, but to extract. Once you begin explaining, stopping feels awkward. The trap closes quietly. Silence denies them material. What is not spoken cannot be twisted. What is not offered cannot be reframed. What is withheld cannot be weaponized. Silence also reverses emotional gravity. The one who waits controls attention. Others begin wondering what is being considered, what is being prepared, what they may have misjudged. Anxiety grows in the absence of confirmation. That anxiety weakens position without confrontation. Importantly, controlled silence is not avoidance. It is intentional withholding. You are not disappearing. You are choosing timing. Dirty players expect friction or compliance. They rarely anticipate composure without explanation. When you do not react the way they expect, their script breaks. They begin revealing impatience. Their tone shifts. Their follow-ups increase. Their urgency exposes itself. Each attempt to regain control teaches you more about their intent. Silence turns the other side into the performer. There is also a reputational effect. Those who respond instantly appear reactive. Those who choose timing appear measured. Observers notice this contrast. Authority is associated with control over pace, not volume of response. Many people fear that silence looks weak. Manipulative people encourage this belief because it benefits them. In reality, restraint communicates confidence. It suggests options. It implies evaluation rather than defense. Silence also protects you from emotional manipulation. When feelings are given time to settle, clarity replaces impulse. Decisions made after pause are harder to redirect. Dirty players depend on immediacy. Remove immediacy, and their influence fades. The goal is not to stall indefinitely. It is to respond when information is sufficient and pressure has shifted. You speak when words carry weight. You move when others are already exposed. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the pace. Because pace is power. And those who cannot rush you cannot steer you. Number 3, why explaining yourself makes you lose. There is a belief that explanation is clarity. That if you explain yourself well enough, misunderstandings disappear, intentions are respected, and fairness is restored. That belief is comforting. And it is dangerously wrong. The uncomfortable truth is this. The moment you begin explaining yourself, you give up authority over interpretation. Explanation feels honest. It feels transparent. It feels morally correct. But psychologically, explanation changes the power dynamic. When you explain, you are no longer acting from position. You are seeking agreement. And agreement is optional. Authority is not. Strategic thinkers understood something most people miss. Outcomes do not require explanation. Only insecurity does. When you justify a decision, a boundary, or a choice, you invite evaluation. Once evaluation begins, others feel entitled to decide whether your reasoning is valid, sufficient, or acceptable. This is where leverage quietly shifts away from you. Dirty players understand this instinctively. They do not argue outcomes. They interrogate reasoning. Because reasoning can be dismantled. Every explanation you offer becomes structure. Structure creates angles. Angles create opportunities. Details can be quoted selectively. Tone can be reframed. Motives can be questioned. The more you explain, the more material exists to manipulate. Spiritually awakened people are especially vulnerable here. They value being understood. They fear being misrepresented. They want alignment. Manipulators rely on that desire. They ask questions that appear reasonable. They express mild confusion. They invite clarification. Not to understand. To extract. Once you start explaining, stopping feels socially uncomfortable. You feel invested in being understood. That investment is the trap. Now you begin correcting interpretations. Clarifying tone. Defending intent. Each response pulls you deeper into their frame. The conversation stops being about facts. It becomes about narrative control. And narrative control always favors the one who did not speak first. Silence operates differently. Silence cannot be edited. It cannot be quoted. It cannot be selectively remembered. What remains unsaid cannot be weaponized against you. Strategic thinkers understood that ambiguity protects power. When others cannot fully interpret your intent, they hesitate. Hesitation slows aggression. Slowness restores balance. Explanation also reveals priorities. When you justify yourself, you expose what matters to you. What you fear being misunderstood about. Where pressure lands. Manipulators catalog this information. What you thought was honesty becomes a road map. There is also a psychological shift once explanation begins. You start monitoring reactions. You adjust language. You soften edges. Your energy shifts from decision-making to self-management. Authority dissolves quietly. The common mistake people make is believing explanation prevents conflict. In reality, explanation often invites it. Because now there is something to argue. Strategic authority rarely explains itself in detail. It announces decisions. It enforces boundaries. It lets others adjust. This is not arrogance. It is positioning. Dirty players often provoke explanation deliberately. They question timing. They imply confusion. They frame disagreement as concern. Not because they need clarity, but because they want you talking. Once you do, they relax. They have access. The counter-move is discernment. Not every action requires commentary. Not every boundary needs defense. Not every decision benefits from transparency. You speak when words carry weight. You remain quiet when silence carries more. When explanation is minimal, each word matters. When explanation is constant, words lose authority. Power is preserved not by saying more, but by choosing when silence is stronger. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I do not explain what does not require approval. Because once you stop explaining yourself to feel safe, you stop handing people handles to pull. Number 4, why dirty players never attack directly, they position. Most people imagine conflict as confrontation. An argument. A disagreement. An obvious clash. That is not how influence actually works. The uncomfortable truth is this. By the time conflict becomes visible, the outcome has often already been decided. Dirty players rarely attack head-on. Direct confrontation creates resistance. It creates visibility. It creates risk. Positioning does not. Instead of pushing you into conflict, they place you inside circumstances where any response works against you. They do not accuse. They suggest. They do not oppose. They frame. They do not challenge openly. They arrange conditions quietly. You are not forced to act. You are guided into acting. And once you respond, the environment has already been designed to make you appear impatient, emotional, or unreasonable. Positioning relies on context, not force. Strategic thinkers understood that perception is formed before dialogue begins. Timing. Audience. Comparison. Dirty players choose moments when you are rushed, tired, or under pressure. They wait until others are present. They introduce variables subtly, then step back. When tension rises, they remain calm. Contrast does the work. Observers draw conclusions without instruction. Reputation is rarely destroyed by accusation. It erodes through implication. When someone appears consistently composed while you appear reactive, the narrative writes itself. This is why loud defense often backfires. Defense confirms the frame that something needs defending. The more energy you invest in correcting perception, the more attention you draw to it. Dirty players depend on this instinct. They expect urgency. They expect explanation. They expect emotion. That expectation is part of the design. Positioning also works through role assignment. Before you speak, you are cast. The difficult one. The complainer. The impatient one. The emotional one. Once the role exists, every action is interpreted through that lens. Facts become secondary. Labels dominate. Dirty players do not argue facts. They manage roles. Strategic awareness begins with recognizing the stage. If you do not understand how a situation is arranged, you will mistake manipulation for coincidence. You will respond to surface behavior while ignoring structure. And structure determines outcome. The common mistake people make is reacting to content instead of context. They argue statements instead of observing positioning. They defend behavior instead of noticing timing. The counter move is composure and observation. When you slow down, the design weakens. When you refuse to perform the assigned role, the script collapses. Minimal response removes contrast. Silence removes amplification. Positioning fails when there is no reaction to leverage. Dirty players depend on predictability. They need you to defend. They need you to explain. They need you to emote on cue. When you do not, control slips. Observers begin noticing inconsistencies. Why is the calm one provoking repeatedly? Why does the reasonable person keep pushing? Without reaction, manipulation becomes visible. Strategic thinkers understood that power operates invisibly when allowed to. The strongest response is often restraint. Let context speak. Let patterns repeat. Let silence deny momentum. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I refuse to perform inside someone else's frame. Because once you see positioning, you stop reacting to it. And when reaction ends, influence weakens. Number 5. Why fairness becomes a trap. Fairness feels safe. It feels moral. It feels clean. It feels like higher ground. And that is precisely why it becomes a trap. The uncomfortable truth is this: fairness only works in environments where everyone agrees to honor it. Outside of shared agreement, fairness does not create balance. It creates exposure. Spiritually awakened people often cling to fairness because it aligns with their identity. They believe that if they act justly, outcomes will eventually correct themselves. They believe intentions will be recognized. They believe restraint will be rewarded. That belief is comforting. But it is not strategic. Dirty players recognize fairness as rigidity. They understand that when someone commits to equal treatment regardless of context, that commitment can be exploited. They step outside the rules while expecting you to remain inside them. You hesitate. They advance. You calculate ethics. They calculate advantage. The mismatch determines the outcome before the interaction even finishes. The psychology behind this is tempo. While you are deciding what is appropriate, the other side is acting on what is effective. This delay is not neutral. It transfers momentum. Fairness also creates guilt-based control. Dirty players often accuse others of being unfair the moment leverage is threatened. Not because fairness matters to them, but because guilt works on you. That accusation triggers hesitation. It pressures you to retreat into restraint. It pulls you back into moral self-management while they continue moving. Justice without enforcement is symbolic. It communicates values but produces no consequence. Dirty players do not respond to symbols. They respond to cost. When behavior carries no price, it repeats. When imbalance creates comfort, it deepens. The common mistake good people make is confusing moral satisfaction with strategic success. They feel right while losing position. Strategic awareness does not abandon justice. It contextualizes it. Accuracy replaces fairness. Accuracy responds to behavior as it is, not as it should be. It adjusts proportionally. It introduces consequence without drama. Accuracy does not seek balance. It restores leverage. This does not mean excess. It means precision. When someone crosses a line, accuracy responds clearly. Not politely. Not emotionally. Effectively. Once behavior carries cost, behavior changes. Dirty players respect enforcement, not ideals. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I respond accurately, not emotionally. Because when you stop confusing fairness with strength, you stop losing quietly. Number 6. The psychology of delayed response. Speed is often mistaken for confidence. In reality, speed is frequently a leak. The uncomfortable truth is this: immediate reactions serve the person who provoked them more than the person who made them. Dirty players rely on urgency. They push for quick answers, fast decisions, instant emotional engagement. Because momentum reduces choice. When you react quickly, you reveal priorities. You expose pressure points. You show where influence lands. Delay removes those signals. The psychology here is simple. The human mind struggles with unresolved space. When a reaction is expected and none arrives, uncertainty forms. Uncertainty creates internal pressure. Dirty players are conditioned to manage situations through pace. They provoke, then watch how fast you move. Delay disrupts that conditioning. Without feedback, they lose orientation. They begin questioning timing. They reconsider strategy. They grow restless. What was confident becomes uneasy. What was calculated begins to wobble. Delay reverses emotional gravity. The one who waits controls attention. Others begin wondering what is being considered, what is being prepared, what they may have misjudged. Anxiety grows in the absence of confirmation. That anxiety weakens position without confrontation. The common mistake people make is assuming delay looks weak. Manipulative people encourage this belief because it benefits them. In reality, restraint communicates confidence. It suggests options. It implies evaluation rather than defense. Delay is not avoidance. It is intentional withholding. You are not disappearing. You are choosing timing. Dirty players expect friction or compliance. They rarely anticipate composure without explanation. When you do not respond the way they expect, their script breaks. They follow up unnecessarily. They escalate tone. They reveal impatience. Each attempt to regain control exposes intent. Delay turns the other side into the performer. There is also a reputational effect. Those who respond instantly appear reactive. Those who choose timing appear measured. Observers notice this contrast. Authority is associated with control over pace, not volume of response. Delay also protects you from emotional manipulation. When feelings are given time to settle, clarity replaces impulse. Decisions made after pause are harder to redirect. Dirty players depend on immediacy. Remove immediacy, and influence fades. The goal is not to stall forever. It is to act when information is sufficient and pressure has shifted. You move when others are already exposed. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the pace. Because those who cannot rush you cannot steer you. Conclusion: the position beyond reaction. Everything you've heard points to one truth. Power does not shout. It does not rush. It does not explain itself to feel safe. Power adjusts the environment and lets others expose themselves. The mistake most people make is trying to win exchanges. The objective is to become unreachable. Dirty players operate where access exists. They provoke where reaction is likely. They invest energy where influence is possible. When access becomes expensive, behavior changes. Not because of morality. Because of self-interest. You do not need to confront every move. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. You do not need to prove your intentions. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to be positioned. Once people realize you do not chase outcomes. Do not panic under pressure. Do not explain yourself into safety. They stop playing dirty with you. Not out of respect. Out of calculation. Because manipulation only works where access is cheap. Remember this. You do not become powerful by adding noise. You become powerful by removing predictability. Stay sharp. Stay aware. And never play a game you do not understand.